Hello, this is Andrew, and today I wanted to go over some of the stories that ended up happening in class, and just to get certain things off my chest. As a medical person, it's important to sort of talk about it so that way it just lifts up certain burdens from the chest. I've been teaching first aid, CPR, AED, and higher up level for about a decade now, and some of the most impactful stories I'm about to tell you. From a person refusing to do compressions because of the color of the mannequin, all the way up to someone actually acknowledging that they ended up killing somebody. When I initially started teaching, it was actually as a side gig, and I enjoyed teaching. I was trying to make a difference, teach other people, about the medical community. And I thought I was making a difference. When I started teaching though, certain things were really impactful. I found out it was about 10% of the people that ended up taking the class. They were required to take it, but they actually did not want to. And in the beginning, I would ask the person, for instance, there was one mother, which I found out later she was a mother, and she was standing in the back, and we had seats and tables where they would practice and demonstrate compressions, and it was for infant also, so they would do compressions on the table. But she wouldn't even sit in the seat, and she kept standing off in the corner, which I do allow. Some people, they don't like to sit down, even though our seats are cushioned. And so she ended up staying off to the corner, which I do sometimes too. If it's a long class, I might stand up and, move around. So when I finally engaged with her and I said, ma'am, I said, we have plenty of seats, would you like to take a seat? And she was like, she stood off to the corner. She's like, no, I'll stand here, for a while. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. So I went ahead and was instructing the class. But she kept standing near the corner. Even during the skills session, she wouldn't come up front to practice the skills, which is necessary for the certification. So I went back to her and I said, ma'am, you need to demonstrate the skills so that way you can actually get certified. And she's like, no, that's okay. I'm just here because my job required me to be here. And I said, well, you can't get certified if you can't demonstrate the skills. And I said a little bit more firmer than that to her, because I know she was with a bunch of other coworkers, so she needed that certification in order to literally stay in her job. And she ends up going into the story about when she was a young mother. She ended up dropping her kid. I think it was on the head, and that was very traumatic for her. She says, she felt really bad as a mother, that she didn't want to do any first aid to somebody else because sadly she thought that she couldn't do it as a mother because of her past experiences and stuff like that. And there were other stories, I won't say as bad as that, but where people, they are required to be there for their job, they need the certification, but yet the job literally takes what has happened in their past life and forces it on them. And then we are left, even though I had thought that I was, just teaching a regular CPR AED class, go in, this was a blended learning, do the hour, 2-hour class, and then move along. But now I find out, and it's happening even more, and I think that's also why I'm making this video, because I'm wondering, if other people have had this experiences, or if other people want to share their stories down in the comments. Where jobs are now forcing people to have the certifications, which I understand. Some of it is for liability and legal reasons, and some insurance companies now require jobs to have it. But we're putting people in a very strange predicament, where they have to face their fears. Which there's a correct way, and then there's a forceful way. And me being in the medical community, I have a little bit more knowledge on sort of how to handle those situations, but nonetheless it is hard. That mother, I actually did not end up certifying her, and I called a job, I explained the situation, and luckily they worked with her actually. They got her a counselor, and she ended up coming back 6 months later, which I was surprised. I didn't know that, companies, they say that they'll get a counselor, they'll, commit, and stuff like that, but then they never follow through. But she ended up coming back 6 months later, and I knew that it was a guilt that she had experienced, and that's why if she couldn't help her child, how was she going to help other people's child, or how was she going to help other people, which is understandable. So a guy came in, sort of early. It was about 15 minutes early, so not like really, really early. And he was telling me how he was required to take this class. He was a carpenter. Was telling me about, building different things. Very energetic, kind of like a burly guy, big, hefty, had a beard, a mountain man basically. And he was very enthusiastic, telling me about, all the things he was building and stuff like that. Very engaging, very, I would say happy, and excited. And I guess about what he did, so not necessarily for the class itself. So when we were doing the skills portion, once again, I asked him whether he wanted for me to demonstrate, and then he could mimic what I was doing. Because I understand, as I said before, people have difficulty sometimes reading what to do, so they would rather watch somebody and then they could literally demonstrate the skill right afterwards. So it's been a little bit of a while. He stood off to the side, which I allow people to do. Sometimes people allow the people to volunteer, and then they would be the last ones to go. He was finally in the last group, and he still wasn't doing the skills. And so I asked him, sir, did you want me to demonstrate the skills, and then you can repeat after me? And he's like, no, that's okay. I'll just stand off to the side a little bit more. And I said, okay, that's fine. I said, this is the last group, so you can jump on in whenever you want to. And so I, was helping other people. And he was still standing off to the side. The way that he was looking and pacing around, I knew something was off. So I went to him again, and this time I looked directly in his eye versus, a little bit off to the side. I would look at him, and then I would usually say that to somebody while I'm helping somebody else. And so this time I went, face to face, just in case, once again, someone was talking about like post-traumatic stress, and that's the reason why they didn't want to physically do something. And he looks at me directly in the eye, and he says, I killed somebody. And I remember him looking directly, him looking into my eyes. And when he said that, the last thing I would have expected, and I remember I literally had to lean up against the wall. The way he said it was just so shocking, but I knew that it was true. So I once again had to regain my composure, and I actually called for a 5-minute break, and I pulled the guy off to the side. And because what I do in my actual job, I teach on the side, as I said before. And so I put him off to the side, and I said, sir, what you said was very serious. I said, can you explain to me what exactly happened? Because I'm required up to a certain extent, depending on what things are, to report certain things. And this was under the spectrum, based upon how he said it, that I would have to report it. And so he goes into this story, and of course, mind you, this guy is about 45 years old. And he goes into this story about how when he was about 9 years old, he saw his father in the bed. And he climbed up onto the bed. He didn't know exactly what to do, and he found out that his father was unconscious, and he started doing compressions on him. And while he's telling me this story, I'm like, I got a little bit confused because the way that he said that he had killed somebody. And then he goes into telling me that he was trying to do compressions on the bed, and because he was doing it inaccurately, he killed his father. And I'm trying to add up the dates in my head while listening to his story. I'm like, okay, so the guy's 45 years old. This happened when he was about 8 or 9 years old. That is like a 30-year difference. And so I asked him, I said, sir, did you not get any counseling for this? And he looks directly at me. He says, counseling for what? And I literally did, I put up my hands, I'm like, it's like, counseling for what? It's like, my God. And he had refused, I found out a little bit later on, that he had refused supervisory positions because he had refused to do the first aid CPR AED class. But his supervisor now forced him to take this class, and that is why he was in the class. Other than that, he would not have set foot in that class. And so I explained to him, I said, okay, you don't have to physically do it now. I'm going to work on one-on-one with you after class. I said, this is a unique case, and I'm going to explain something to the group, and hopefully that will, help you out a little bit. So when we went back into the group, and the other people, I tell them this, and this is what I've heard from an EMS conference actually, which I'm about to tell you now. We as instructors do a disservice when we tell people, oh, you're definitely going to save somebody. You're definitely going to save someone. If you know how to do chest compressions, you are going to save them. And I think that's a common misconception a lot of instructors have. It is important to tell them, take action. Activate that EMS system. Try hard to save that person's life. But that person is going downhill. If someone is having a heart attack, if someone is in cardiac arrest, they are going downhill. To be honest, we are not there to really save that person's life. We are there to buy them time. And that is what I was telling the group. I said, we are there to buy them time. They are already literally clinically dead at that point. And we are trying to buy them time until EMS arrives so that way they can get a higher level of care. And I hear instructors sometimes tell groups and things like that, you go out there and make a difference, you're going to save lives. You're going to help sustain somebody maybe. But it's sort of inaccurate because we give people almost a false sense of hope when we say, go out there and save somebody's life. And that's what I told the group, that, somebody just told me a story, and that person was going downhill already. Nothing that they could have done would probably bring that person back, but the chest compressions that we do, activating that EMS system, just adds on another level of obstacle when that person is going downhill. So as I said, we're buying that person's time. They're going downhill no matter what. We're literally putting obstacles in the way to buy that person time. And I hope that you can convey that to your students too. And I once again recommended a counselor for that person. But yeah, I will never forget his face, and I will never forget that moment that he told me. And it's really unfortunate because he had carried that for 30 years. 30 years. If someone had talked with him, he could have been reversed. He could have become a supervisor a long time ago if somebody had just initiated that conversation or talked with him. That small thing, but that small thing, especially as a child, made a difference. Him trying to do CPR on his father, not only is very, very emotional at that point and at that stage in his life, but the fact that he had survivor's guilt based upon it, even though his father was probably already dead hours and hours beforehand. So that was very unfortunate. So I tell these stories, part of being also in the EMS field, we tell sometimes each other stories because it lifts off weight off of our chest. But also, I'm just wondering, am I the only one that has these weird stories, or do other people have stories that they want to share, or does this happen to other people in their classes also? You can comment below, tell us, maybe form a group, probably not, or a therapy group. But yeah, a common class. We go in, we make our money, and we think it's going to be real quick, and then somebody throws us a curveball. And nowadays, I wouldn't say like 100% of the time, maybe only like 10% of the time, but it seems like it's 100% of the time. We're almost becoming like therapists, because people would tell us their stories or their I wouldn't say they're deep dark secrets, but things that are really affecting them. And the way that they say it, you can't just be like, oh, okay, good story, thank you. Or maybe it's me, and maybe it's me, trying to connect with that participant too much, and maybe I'm in the wrong, and maybe I should, disconnect, and they're the participant, I'm the instructor, and that's that, and be like, oh, hey, if you want to tell me a personal story, go ahead and see a therapist. So this person comes in, and he's pretty vocal, he's talking with other people and things like that, very engaging. And especially in the beginning, when people come in early, thank goodness, that usually doesn't happen, as many of you guys know. I didn't see anything, off with this person, able to talk with everybody and things like that. And so when we went into the skills portion, I have people walk up and then they start demonstrating the skills. And usually I don't say, the first row, you three come up. I just, ask for volunteers to come up. And then they just cycle out. And so that's what I did. And of course, some people, they stand off to the side, they watch how other people do it, and then they mimic it, which I do allow. Some people are good at reading how to do it, and then some people, they need to watch somebody, and then they would literally mimic how to do it. So that's what I thought this person was doing. And so I allowed him to, stay off on the side, and then I was correcting other people when they were doing the chest compressions and things like that. So when he was finding not necessarily the last one, but the last group of people, he came up and I said, you need to, demonstrate the skills, because he was a little bit hesitant, which sometimes happens. As I said in my previous video, people, they have PTSD or for whatever reason, and they don't want to do it. And so either I work with them after class or things like that. And so I said, you need to demonstrate the skill in order to get certified. And so finally he walks up to the dummy, and I'm helping other people out, but he's still standing next to the dummy. And I'm wondering, what is going on? Is there an issue? And of course I'm thinking this in my head, I don't tell him, what the heck is wrong with you, something like that. So I asked him, I said, sir, did you want me to demonstrate so that way you can do what I do? And he says, I refuse to do it on this dummy. And me being me, especially me being a minority and in the EMS field, some things fly over my head because they're just so far out there. For me, it just doesn't click. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, we have other mannequins. You can utilize that. We have a child mannequin, and we have an infant mannequin that you can utilize. You don't have to use the adult one because this was adult and infant course. So some people, they start out with the infant because that's what they're most comfortable with, and then they move on to an adult. And then he looks down at the dummy once again with his eyes versus just gesturing, and it says, I refuse to do it on this dummy. And I was like, okay. I didn't know exactly what was going on. And so I sort of stared at him because this was weird. Most of the time, people, they would say, they would do an add-on. They'd be like, oh, I don't want to do it because it's something that happened in my past life. Or I don't want to do it because, I'd rather do the infant one first. So I was waiting, and I think he knew I was waiting for something because I was literally standing there. Because as I said, he's the last group, and he's almost like the last one while everyone else is doing it. And I remember him saying, I refuse to do it on this colored dummy. And when he said that, I couldn't comprehend it, to be honest. Especially since it was the first time that something like that had happened. And I thought it was something else. It was like the clicking sound. It was maybe the light up of the big reds. The batteries weren't working or something like that. And so I thought I misheard something. But then he said it again. And I was so shocked. And thank goodness I was shocked, so that way I didn't hit him upside the head. No, I wouldn't have done that anyway. But I basically said, and I looked at him directly in the eye once I recovered from what he had said. And I said, if you cannot perform the skills to the standard, I said, we will not certify you. And it was the only time I actually didn't give anybody a refund. And I would say that this is a one-off. But in the decade that I've been teaching, this has happened several times. And I do mention this in my instructor class. God forbid that it ever happens to them. And I do teach quite a bit. But this is the 21st century. And I'm gonna leave it at that because there's really nothing I could say. To this day, I'm still speechless.